Let me tell you about a man named Victor. Not Victor the philosopher, not Victor the celebrity. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist, a father, a husband. A man who walked into Auschwitz in 1942 with everything: his family, his manuscripts, his entire life's work, and walked out in 1945 with almost nothing. Almost. Because here's what they couldn't take from him. Here's what the guards, the starvation, the unimaginable suffering couldn't strip away, no matter how hard they tried. The space between what happens to him and how he chose to respond. He called it the last of human freedoms. And in that freedom, that tiny, invisible, undestroyable gap between stimulus and response, Viktor Frankl didn't just survive the Holocaust. He built the foundation of an entirely new branch of psychology. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most influential books in human history. He lived to 92. He lectured at universities around the world. He built a legacy that outlasted every single person who tried to break him. So let me ask you something, and I need you to really sit with this question. If a man in a Nazi concentration camp could find that freedom, what's your excuse? What is it, exactly, that's stopping you from building the version of yourself that can't be moved? The version that doesn't collapse when life gets uncomfortable. The version that doesn't quit when nobody's watching. The version that, slowly, quietly, invisibly, becomes so unbreakably strong that success has absolutely no choice but to follow you like a shadow. This video is about that version of you. Not the version that gets motivated by a good morning and quits by Tuesday. Not the version that watches self-improvement content and calls that self-improvement. The real version. The deep version. The one built from the inside out using a philosophy that was forged in the hardest fires in human history. Stoicism. We're going to walk through 12 principles. Not surface-level tips, not Instagram quotes, but real, deep, ancient wisdom that has been pressure-tested by some of the most powerful, most tested, most remarkable human beings who ever lived. Emperors, slaves, generals, prisoners, people who had everything and people who had nothing, all came to the same conclusion. The only thing that determines the quality of your life is the quality of the person doing the living. Drop one word in the comments right now. The one word that describes the version of yourself you're building toward. One word. Let's see what this community is made of. Before we go deep, I want to address something that comes up every time I talk about Stoicism. Someone always says, "That's ancient philosophy. What does a dead Roman emperor have to tell me about my mortgage, my anxiety, my social media addiction, my career?" And I love that question, because the honest answer is everything. Here's what most people don't understand about the Stoics. They weren't monks living in caves. They weren't academics sitting in comfortable ivory towers theorizing about life. Marcus Aurelius was running the largest empire in the known world while simultaneously dealing with a devastating plague that killed up to 2,000 people a day, military invasions on multiple fronts, and a political system that would have destroyed lesser men. He wrote Meditations, the most intimate personal journal you'll ever read from a world leader, not for publication, not for fame, as private notes to himself. Just a man trying to become better at being human. Epictetus was born a slave, literally owned by another human being. His master once twisted his leg just to demonstrate that he could, and when Epictetus warned him it would break, and then it did break, Epictetus simply said, "I told you it would break." No rage, no breakdown, no identity crisis. Complete sovereignty over his internal world, even while having zero sovereignty over his external one. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He was also exiled twice, nearly executed, forced to watch his closest friends die, and ultimately ordered by Emperor Nero, his own former student, to take his own life. He died with more composure than most of us manage when we're stuck in traffic. These aren't fairy tale characters. These are real humans who faced real suffering and chose, consciously, deliberately, daily, to build themselves into something that couldn't be broken. And their methodology, their actual practical system for becoming unbreakable, that's what we're going to go through today. 12 principles. Each one builds on the last. Each one is something you can start using today, not tomorrow, not when your circumstances change. Today. Because here's the thing about Stoicism that most people miss when they first encounter it. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's not about not caring. It's not about some cold, robotic detachment from life. It's about becoming so internally strong, so deeply rooted in your own values and your own growth, that the storms of life, and there will always be storms, can rage all they want without uprooting you. Think of an oak tree versus a glass sculpture. The glass sculpture looks impressive, elegant, perfect in still conditions. But one strong wind and it shatters. The oak tree, weathered, scarred, asymmetrical, not perfect, but after 50 years of storms it doesn't just still stand. It's become something the storms themselves made stronger. You want to be the oak tree. This is how. Principle 1. The dichotomy of control. The most important idea you will ever learn. If Stoicism were a house, this would be the foundation. Every other principle rests on this one. Get this wrong and nothing else works. Get this right and everything changes. Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, reputation, command, and in one word, whatever are not our own actions. Epictetus, Enchiridion. It sounds simple, embarrassingly simple. Surely something that profound can't be reduced to just some stuff is in your control and some stuff isn't. But watch what happens when you actually apply it. In 2008, the financial crisis hit. Markets collapsed. Fortunes evaporated overnight. Thousands of fund managers, traders, and investors went into complete psychological freefall. Anxiety disorders. Marriages collapsed. Some took their own lives. And then there was a particular type of investor, let's call them the Stoic investors, who responded completely differently. They'd been trained to separate what they could control from what they couldn't. They couldn't control the market. They couldn't control housing prices. They couldn't control government policy. All of that was outside their circle, but they could control their analysis, their risk management, their asset allocation, their emotional response to loss, their decision-making process. Those things were inside their circle. So when the crash hit, they didn't panic. They got calm. They got methodical. They assessed what was inside their circle and executed. And when the recovery came, and it always comes, they were positioned brilliantly. Same external event, completely different internal response, completely different outcomes. I want you to do something right now. Imagine two circles, a small inner circle, a large outer circle. Inside the small inner circle, write everything you have direct, complete, sovereign control over. Your thinking, your attention, your effort, your values, your words, your responses, your habits. In the large outer circle, everything else. Other people's opinions, traffic, the economy, your genetics, the weather, your boss's mood, social media algorithms, whether your business idea catches fire or falls flat. Now here's the question that will reorganize your entire relationship to stress and failure. How much of your mental and emotional energy are you spending on the outer circle? Most people, and I mean most, including highly intelligent, highly successful people, spend the vast majority of their mental energy on the outer circle, things they fundamentally cannot control. They rehearse arguments with people who aren't in the room. They catastrophize about futures that may never arrive. They obsess over what other people think of them. They lose sleep over stock prices. They check the news looking for something to confirm their anxiety. And then they wonder why they're exhausted, why they feel powerless, why progress feels so slow. What happens when you shift? There's a man named James Stockdale, US Navy pilot, shot down over Vietnam in 1965. Spent 7.5 years as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton, one of the most brutal prison systems ever operated. He was tortured over 20 times. He was denied medical care. He was kept in isolation. He was paraded before cameras as propaganda. And he came out not just intact, but with a clarity and depth of character that made him one of the most respected figures in American military history. He later became president of the Naval War College. When the researcher Jim Collins asked him how he survived, Stockdale said something extraordinary. He said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted that I would get out and that it would turn out to be the defining event of my life, which, looking back, I would not trade." Collins then asked, "Who didn't make it out?" Stockdale replied, "The optimists. The ones who said, 'We'll be out by Christmas.' Then Christmas would come and go. Then they'd say, 'We'll be out by Easter.' Easter would come and go. And then Thanksgiving. And then Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart." He paused, then said, "This is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be." The Stoics called this disciplined acceptance of reality, not passive resignation, active, clear-eyed engagement with what is actually happening, freed from the distortion of wishful thinking. Focus on the inner circle. Accept the outer circle for what it is. Work on what you can work on. Release what you cannot control. When you do this, genuinely do it, not just intellectually understand it, something shifts. The anxiety reduces, not because your problems go away, because you stop fighting reality and start engaging with it. Type in the comments right now one thing you've been obsessing over that is completely outside your inner circle. Just name it. Awareness is the first step to release. Principle 2. The obstacle is the way, turning resistance into rocket fuel. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is the second principle, and it might be the most counterintuitive thing we'll discuss today, because the human brain is wired to treat obstacles as stop signs. Something gets in your way, your brain signals threat, signals pain, signals retreat. It's evolutionary. It kept our ancestors alive. But it's catastrophic for growth. Because what the Stoics understood, and what modern psychology is only now catching up to, is that the obstacle itself, the resistance, the friction, the difficulty, is not separate from your growth. It is your growth. In December 1914, Thomas Edison's entire research and manufacturing complex in West Orange, New Jersey, caught fire. It was a massive fire, visible from miles away. 10 buildings were destroyed. The damage was estimated at around $2 million. That's roughly $50 million in today's money. Edison was 67 years old. He watched his life's work burn. His son, Charles, found him standing at the edge of the fire, watching it with an expression Charles couldn't quite read. He thought his father would be devastated, broken. He rushed to him. Edison looked at his son and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." The next morning, Edison walked through the ruins and said, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." 3 weeks later, his factory was in partial operation. 3 months later, record-breaking output. The obstacle didn't stop Edison. It reorganized him. It cleared out the old. It created the conditions for something better. Here's how you apply this in your actual life right now. Whatever obstacle you're facing, and I want you to bring a real one to mind, not a hypothetical. Ask yourself 3 questions. Question 1, what skill is this obstacle forcing me to develop? Rejection from a job forces you to develop resilience, to sharpen your interview skills, to clarify what you actually want. A failed business teaches you about market research, about timing, about what you actually value. A relationship ending teaches you about communication, boundaries, and self-knowledge. Question 2, what perspective is this obstacle giving me that I couldn't have had otherwise? Some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world trace their success directly to the thing that forced them to change course. The record label that rejected them, the investor who said no, the company that laid them off. Without those no's, they'd never have found their yes. Question 3, who am I becoming through the process of facing this? Not just, will I overcome this? But, who will I be on the other side? Because the version of you that navigates this obstacle successfully is a fundamentally different person than the version of you that avoided it. The Stoics weren't naive about this. They didn't pretend obstacles weren't painful. Seneca wrote about grief with raw emotional honesty. Marcus Aurelius wrote openly about his frustration, his weariness, his days when he didn't want to get out of bed. But they trained themselves to look at the obstacle and immediately ask, what does this require of me? Not, why is this happening? Not, is this fair? But, what does this require of me? That question is one of the most powerful tools in human psychology. From today, when you hit an obstacle, and you will, I want you to practice what I call the 3-second Stoic pivot. In the first second, acknowledge the feeling. Don't suppress it. Don't pretend it's fine. Feel it fully. In the second second, name the obstacle clearly. Not a story about it, just what is it, factually. In the third second, ask the one question, what does this require of me? It won't be perfect at first. That's fine, the practice is the point. And over time, weeks, months, that 3-second pivot becomes automatic. The obstacle stops triggering panic and starts triggering curiosity. Tell me in the comments, what's the biggest obstacle you've ever turned into fuel? How did it change you? Your answer might be the things someone else needs to read today. Principle 3, amor fati, the radical love of everything that happens. Most philosophies say, accept what happens. Some say, find peace with what happens. The Stoics went further, specifically Marcus Aurelius and later the Stoic influenced Nietzsche. They said, love what happens, not just tolerate it, not just accept it, love it. Amor fati, the love of fate. That's insane, right? Love the cancer diagnosis, love the betrayal, love the career collapse, not the suffering itself, not the pain as pain, but everything that happens, including the suffering, as part of the material from which your life is built. Think of it this way. A sculptor doesn't curse the marble for being hard. The hardness is the point. The resistance is what makes sculpture possible. Without it, the tool would pass through with nothing to show for the effort. Nick Vujicic was born in Melbourne, Australia in 1982. Born with no arms and no legs, a condition called tetra amelia syndrome. Doctors had never seen a case like his. His parents were devastated. He grew up being bullied so severely that by age 8 he was contemplating suicide. And then something shifted. He started asking a different question, not, why did this happen to me, but, what is this for? He became a motivational speaker. He has spoken to over 900 million people in 70 countries. He got married. He has 4 children. His net worth is estimated at tens of millions of dollars. But here's the part that gets me every time. He has said in interviews that if he could choose, if a doctor walked in tomorrow and offered him arms and legs, he would decline. Because who he is, the depth of his character, the reach of his impact, the quality of his relationships, none of it exists without the very thing that appeared to be his greatest misfortune. Amor fati. Not, this is okay, but this is mine. This is the material I was given, and I love what I'm building with it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He wasn't being glib. He was training himself. Every day, writing in his private journal, he was rewiring his relationship to impermanence, to loss, to change. Here's a practice I want you to try for 30 days. Every morning, before you do anything else, write down one thing that happened yesterday that you initially experienced as bad, difficult, or unwelcome. Then write 3 ways it contributed to your growth, your clarity, or your strength. At first, you'll struggle. You'll write vague, unconvincing answers. That's fine. Keep going. Because what you're doing is training your pattern recognition. You're teaching your brain to automatically look for the contribution hidden in the difficulty. After 30 days, most people report a fundamental shift in how quickly they move from reaction to response when something hard happens. The resistance period shrinks. The clarity arrives faster. That's not positive thinking. That's not pretending things are fine. That's a genuine cognitive restructuring rooted in thousands of years of philosophical practice and backed by modern neuroscience. What's one thing from your past, something that hurt when it happened, that you can now see was preparing you for who you needed to become? Share it below. This is powerful. Principle 4. The discipline of desire. Wanting what is worth wanting. Here's something interesting about suffering that most people never examine. Most human suffering doesn't come from what we don't have. It comes from what we think we need that we don't have. The suffering is in the gap between reality and expectation. And most of the time, we can't change reality. But we can, and this is the Stoic insight, examine and change what we think we need. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. This is not the same as settling. This is not the same as having no ambition. The Stoics were some of the most ambitious people in human history, but they drew a crucial distinction between 2 kinds of wanting. Preferred indifference, things that are fine to pursue, pleasant to have, but which your inner freedom and happiness should never depend on. Wealth, fame, physical health in most cases, success in external projects, other people's approval. These are preferred indifference. You can want them, work toward them, even enjoy having them. But if they're taken away, or if they never arrive, your core self should be unaffected. True goods, things that are genuinely worth wanting because they are fully within your control and because they constitute genuine virtue and flourishing. Wisdom, courage, justice, moderation, the quality of your attention, the honesty of your character, your integrity under pressure. These are true goods. These can never be taken from you, and pursuing them never leaves you empty-handed. There's a remarkable story from the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. Derek Redmond, a British 400-meter runner, was one of the favorites for a medal. He'd been training for 12 years. This was the culmination of his life's work. About 150 meters into the semi-final, his hamstring tore. He collapsed on the track in agony. The race continued. Everyone else crossed the finish line. And then Derek Redmond got up, with a torn hamstring, in agonizing pain, and he started hobbling toward the finish line. Officials tried to stop him. He pushed them away. Security tried to escort him off the track. He refused, and then his father, Jim Redmond, broke through the security barrier, ran onto the track, wrapped his arm around his son's shoulders, and finished the race with him. The crowd of 65,000 people rose to their feet. Derek Redmond didn't win a medal that day. He finished last in his race. By every external metric, it was a failure. And yet, 30 years later, his is one of the most watched, most shared moments in Olympic history. Not because of the medal he won, because of the character he demonstrated when winning became impossible. The character was the true good. The medal was the preferred indifferent. He lost the preferred indifferent. He demonstrated the true good in a way that will be remembered forever. Here's a practical exercise. Write down your top 10 goals, things you're currently working toward or hoping for. Now go through each one and ask, if I never achieve this external result, will my growth, my character and my effort on this journey still have been worth it? If yes, that's a goal aligned with Stoic values. Chase it hard without attachment to the outcome. If no, if the entire value of the pursuit depends on the external result, then you've identified a dependence that could shatter you. That doesn't mean abandon the goal. It means separate the process from the outcome in your mind and learn to genuinely value the person the process is making you. Over time, this shift makes you paradoxically more effective because you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of not getting the result. You pursue it freely, fully, without the anxiety of attachment. What preferred indifferent have you been treating like a true good, like your happiness depends on it? Name it. Naming it is the beginning of freedom. Principle 5. Death as the ultimate clarifier. In ancient Rome, when a general returned from battle with a great triumph, a massive victory parade through the streets, a slave would ride beside him in the chariot and whisper in his ear continuously throughout the entire celebration, "Remember, you will die," not to be morbid, not to dampen the celebration, but to keep the general grounded, to prevent arrogance, to maintain perspective, to ensure that the intoxication of success didn't cloud his judgment. Because death is the great equalizer and the great clarifier. When you genuinely internalize the fact that your time is finite, actually internalize it, not just intellectually know it, something shifts in your priorities. Steve Jobs, in his famous Stanford commencement address in 2005, described a practice he'd maintained for 33 years. Every morning he looked in the mirror and asked himself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew he needed to change something. He wasn't being melodramatic. He'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that year. He knew more viscerally than most people ever do that time was not unlimited. He said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important." That's pure Stoicism. 2,000 years old, standing at a podium in Silicon Valley. This is a confronting exercise, but it's one of the most clarifying things you can do. Sit quietly. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself at the very end of your life. Not dramatically, just honestly. You're old. You're looking back. Ask yourself, what will I wish I had done more of? What will I wish I had done less of? What risks will I wish I had taken? What will I wish I had said to whom that I never said? Write down the answers, don't filter them, don't rationalize them, because those answers are your values speaking in the clearest possible voice. Everything that rises to the surface when you genuinely confront mortality, that is what actually matters to you. Not what you've been told should matter, not what looks good on paper, what actually matters to you. The Stoics practiced this not to become morbid or paralyzed by mortality, but to wake up, to cut through the noise, to stop tolerating lives they didn't actually want. Seneca wrote, "Dum differtur vita transcurrit." While we are postponing, life speeds by. How much of your life are you postponing? How many meaningful conversations are you deferring? How many creative risks are you avoiding? How many mornings are you waking up to a life that is a smaller version of what you actually want? Memento mori is not a threat. It's an invitation. It says, you have time, right now, today, to live differently. Use it. If you had 1 year left to live, and you couldn't change your financial situation, couldn't move anywhere, couldn't acquire anything new, what would you focus on? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Principle 6. Turning fear into a strategy. Every morning before Marcus Aurelius left his quarters, he would mentally rehearse his day, but not with optimism, with challenge. He would ask, what difficulties will I face today? What frustrations? What uncooperative people? What unexpected problems? And then he would mentally prepare his response to each one, not to catastrophize, not to generate anxiety, but to inoculate himself against reaction, to arrive at difficulty already having thought it through. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it's one of the most psychologically sophisticated tools in the Stoic toolkit. Modern performance psychology has arrived at the exact same conclusion. The US Navy SEALs, arguably the most mentally trained military force on Earth, use a technique called mental rehearsal that is virtually identical to premeditatio malorum. Before any mission, SEALs spend extended time not just planning what they want to happen, but imagining in vivid detail everything that could go wrong, every possible obstacle, every potential failure point, and then they plan their response to each one. The result? When things go wrong in the field, and they always do, the team doesn't freeze. They've already been there in their minds. They know their protocol. Their response is faster, calmer,